The most important things. I cannot stress this enough. The one thing that you need to remember above all else to bring with you is Hi friends, I'm Megan from Figs and Feathers Farm, soon to be Foraged Soap Co. If you've watched any of our other videos, you'll know that we are talking all about prepping for your first craft fair. Or maybe it's not your first craft fair, maybe you've done several. But it's always good to have a couple of tips and tricks up your sleeve so that you are prepared. The last couple videos we talked about how to apply, getting into a show, and then what to do after you've been accepted to a show. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how to actually prepare as far as buying and acquiring physical accoutrements for your event. A really big one to start with is making a checklist. So writing down everything that you want to remember to take with you to the event can be very helpful, especially in the morning when you're rushing around trying to make sure everything is packed up appropriately. It's the worst feeling ever when you get on the road and if you have to drive a couple hours and you realize an hour into it, hey, I forgot like half of my inventory. That's an oh shit moment. That's a okay, what were you thinking moment. Write yourself a very nice long checklist, and the morning before you're going, even the night before, make sure you're checking, double checking. You will inevitably forget something. That's just the way of it. If you just expect that it's gonna happen at some point, and when it does, then hopefully you won't freak out as much. Before you spend any money, that you've set yourself a budget for this event that you're doing. Something that I right away learned was that going out and spending a bunch of money on like decorative items is not necessarily so smart. I'm not gonna really recoup a lot of costs from those. I recommend setting yourself a budget saying I'm only going to spend this much money to prepare for this particular event or however many events it is. Depending on the type of event that you've applied to or been accepted to, whether or not it's inside or outside is going to determine whether or not you need a tent. Most, I say most, not all, but most markets or craft fairs or craft shows are going to offer you a 10-foot by 10-foot space. Depending on the state and the weather and the season you are in will also determine if they require you to have a tent or not. Now there are some exceptions to the rules. If you are doing a larger event or an event that is inside, you might be offered a smaller space such as a 5 by 10, or I think I've even done a 3 feet by 8 feet, just enough to have a table set up. So look into your particular event to see what the requirements are. If it so happens that you need a tent for your event, there are a few ways to acquire one. You can certainly borrow one from somebody you know. You can buy really inexpensive tents through sporting goods stores such as Big Five. That's certainly a good place to start if you don't have a lot of money and you're just beginning. If you have a little bit more money to spend, I recommend getting something a little bit sturdier that's going to be easier to set up, that's going to last you many seasons. When I first started out doing markets in 2015, I acquired my tent through Costco, but what was really great about mine, it had a couple of height settings, it had a vent on the top, and it also came with a zippered sides. Very helpful if you were doing an event outside and it is cold, it is rainy, or it is a million degrees like it gets here in my town. I would recommend getting a white top tent if possible. You will find that most of the time vendors will have white tents. If you're the one person who has a blue topped or a green top tent, you're gonna stand out like a sore thumb and you kind of have to be okay with that. Something else to think about depending on the size of your space. What are you going to use for your setup? Are you going to use the basic 6-foot breakdown tables that everybody seems to have for these events? Most people have them because they set up really fast, they break down really easily. If that's not exactly what you're going for, something else you can look into are getting the little 4-foot tables. I have several of those and I like those because they tend to be able to come up a little bit higher than 6-foot tables. If you don't like having the low 6-foot tables, are to actually buy furniture risers. I bought those too so that my 6-foot table can come up a little high so that I can stand instead of doing this sit down pop-up thing. It's really funny. If you haven't done a craft show before, there's this phenomenon that we call the pop-up, where you're literally popping up. We'll pretend that this is our 6-foot table. If you have a 6-foot table and you have a bunch of stuff that's stacked on top of it, and you're sitting in a chair behind it, when somebody walks into your booth, the thing that almost inevitably happens is the pop-up, which means that you look like you're popping up out of nowhere. Kind of a funny sight if you haven't seen it before. I actually bought chairs that were higher. I got a couple from IKEA, or a couple of camp chairs that sit up higher so that I don't actually have to do the pop-up. Pop-up always sort of startles people when they walk into your booth. Unless chairs are being provided for you, make sure that you are bringing chairs with you. It's a very long day. You're gonna want to sit down at some point, I promise. Even if you just have your chair there so that you can sit for 5 minutes here and there, it's really useful to get off your feet, give yourself a little bit of a break, some downtime. I've done events where I've had to stand the entire time just because we've been that busy, but it's always nice to have a chair there, or a chair for somebody who's helping you, just in case. You can Google or look on Pinterest to find trade show or craft fair inspiration. I did this at the very beginning. I have a Pinterest board dedicated specifically to craft fairs. It's called Booth Life, and I basically went in there and pinned elements from that and incorporated into my own. So bug. I don't mind bugs, but not when they're flying in my face. You want to buy items that are going to have longevity. Something you'll hear time and time again, make sure that you're bringing water, make sure that you're bringing something to eat. Snacks are really important. It is a very stressful day filled with so much energy exchange with other people, talking. There's not always a lot of downtime unless it's a slow market. Sometimes we forget to eat, sometimes we forget to drink. Those are both important things to bring with you so that you are set, so that you can take 5 minutes to duck behind your table or go for a short walk if you brought a helper with you. I highly recommend always bring a helper if possible, just so that you can go pee. And if not, make sure that you're making friendors with the other vendors. If you want to know what a friendor is, see one of my previous videos called How to Make Friendors and Influence People. I gave up on the tablescapes a long time ago, and I actually invested in some IKEA shelves. I'll put an image here so that you can see it. That worked really well for me because it breaks down really fast, it sets up really fast, and I can set it up sort of like a store. So thinking about what items you would like to bring with you. Oh my gosh. I swear, every soap maker at every event I've ever done, everybody has the stupid metal letters that spell out soap. And I mean, there's no shame because I have 100% done this, as you'll see. It is so unoriginal now. I literally see it every market that I go to, and it's just like, okay, that's so, it's almost like passé now. It's like, okay, obviously that's a trend that's still going on, and it kind of bums me out because it's just not that original. A couple of notes: if you don't have sides for your tent, take into account the weather and take into account what kind of goods you make. I've had to cancel many events, some even very big events, based on the fact that it was raining, just because my products don't do well in high moisture areas. Soap and water, as you know, go together to make bubbles. Also, big heat. I can't do a lot of my products in heat because soap will sweat if it gets too hot or it gets too cold. I also can't take balms and salves because they will melt. I did an event, and I can't believe that they didn't cancel this event because, I kid you not, it was a day where it was 111, and even though it was supposed to be at night, it doesn't, you know, it wasn't getting dark here until way later in the night, 9 o'clock plus. Part of the glue from my shoe started melting. It was like ridiculous. Even though I brought a fan with me so that I could have a fan, which is also something I recommend if you're doing a really hot event. They make personal fans with misters. Those are super helpful. It was the hottest event I've ever done, and to this day I cannot believe that the coordinators did not shut it down. Like, that's ridiculous because I didn't sell anything. Who's gonna go shopping when it's 111 degrees outside? I'm not. I should not. So it was dumb. So anyway, depending on the weather and where you are, will determine whether or not personal fan, plug-in fan. If it's cold, very cold, we also invested in an indoor propane heater because we've also done events when it was 35 degrees outside and burr. So cold. You can't ever get warm from that. Always bring extra clothing. If you can't get your hands on a heater, or you're bringing hand warmers course, if you have those mittens, hat, or take the opportunity to buy a hat from a local crocheter or knitter. I've done that too, shopping small. But either way, bring a change of clothing. If it's gonna be too hot and you're gonna sweat through your clothes, that's also helpful. Other things to bring with you, have bags or tissue paper to wrap up people's purchases. People like to take away pretty packages, and there'll be a lot of people who will bring their own bags, and that's fine too. Make sure you're wrapping it up appropriately. You've included any relevant information if you're handing out business cards so that you can tuck everything away, either put it in a bag and hand it to them, or they can put it in their bag and everything is safe and sound. Side note on business cards, I'm not a big fan of business cards. I see over and over in different videos people saying business cards are the thing to start with, the thing to have, the thing to, yeah and no. But what we've discovered more than anything is that people throw business cards away. There are very few people in this world that will hang on to a business card for any longer than a short period of time. And usually 10 minutes after taking it out of a bag or a purse, it goes either into the garbage or the recycling. Instead, is try to get your information onto their phone. What that looks like? Hey, follow me on social media. Here's my Instagram handle. Something else you can do is have an actual plaque that has your social media, your website, or an email, and tell people who come in, do you have a business card? No, I don't, but you can feel free to take a picture of this sign, because chances are people aren't going to delete stuff off their phone, but they will throw away a business card. I'm just saying, something to think about. Get that information on their phone. That's how they're going to remember you. They're not going to remember you from a piece of paper that gets tossed around at the bottom of somebody's dirty purse. It's really important to make sure you have a little pouch or a little bag with you that has things like your money, your change. Make sure you have enough change. 5s, 1s are the most important, followed by 10s and a couple of 20s. And make sure you have an electronic way to read people's cards. This is a Square reader. If you want to know a little bit more information, I'll put a link down below. Super helpful, easy for no contact, great for these times when people are very aware and cognizant of touching other people's stuff. Make sure you're taking pen and paper. That always comes in handy for a multitude of reasons. You also have spending money. This is something I never hear vendors talk about, but make sure you're bringing money, or you've allotted some money to go shopping, because you'll want to buy from the other makers. It's just part of it. And that's one of the most fun parts, is going shopping amongst the other vendors and seeing what they have. And if you don't have any money to spare, if you are just strapped for cash, try bartering. I have had so many people come up to me and say, hey, would you be interested in trading? Hey, sure. Bartering's awesome, man. One of the most important things. I cannot stress this enough. The one thing that you need to remember above all else to bring with you is patience. And the reason I say that is because this stuff takes time. Everything from packing up your goods, unpacking your goods, to setting up your booth, to setting up your tent, to getting everything in order, putting your pricing out there, waiting to find parking, driving around so you can get a parking space, driving around just so you can unload. It takes a lot of patience. And all too often I've seen vendors sort of lose their minds because they're tired, or they're hungry because they forgot to eat. They're hot because they're overworked, because they've been standing outside all day. They're grumpy. They just want to go home. And it's just a mess, because people are honking and they're getting frustrated with one another, and it's just taking forever to pack up their shit at the end of the day. Try to remember, everybody wants to go home. So just bring your patience. Try to be a good helper if you can be. If somebody needs a help or hand, be that person. I was always that person. I've helped many of frienders watch their stuff, carry their stuff spilled, we help pick it up. That was always me. I was always the helper. And it feels good to be that person, because you know what? I'm not going to get out of there any faster, so I might as well make somebody's life easier. And I'm not going to tell you to bring a smile, because I think that's bullshit. I don't think that you should have to smile at events. I'm personally not good at smiling at strangers, and I don't think we should be telling anybody else to be smiling either. So you know what? You look how you want to look. There's a lot more stuff to cover. I will do a couple more short videos on things to remember if you're going to do a market or a craft fair. Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you check back soon. Which is 5 feet, which